Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Greg Fischer, the mayor of Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you for joining us here today. On March 13th, 186 days ago, a tragedy beset our community with the death of 26-year-old Breonna Taylor. Her death has ignited a movement in Louisville and the nation for racial justice, sending thousands into our streets and cities all across the country and the world, all crying out for justice for Breonna. And while her death was a tragedy for so many, let's remember that Breonna was first a daughter, a sister, a granddaughter, a niece, a girlfriend, a friend, and a co-worker. And for those who knew her, Breonna's death is personal, the pain is visceral, and the loss ever more devastating. Tamika Palmer, Breonna's mom, says Breonna was a quick student, a hard worker, and an old soul. She was the glue of the family. Breonna was loved. I cannot begin to imagine Ms. Palmer's pain, and I'm deeply, deeply sorry for Breonna's death. While we await a decision from Attorney General Daniel Cameron on whether or not charges will be filed in this case, my administration is not waiting to move ahead with needed reforms to prevent a tragedy like this from ever happening again. That's why I'm here today with the family of Breonna Taylor to announce that Louisville Metro government has settled the civil lawsuit with her estate. As part of this settlement, Louisville Metro government agrees to make several important policy changes. First, to build stronger community connections between our police officers and the people they serve, we will, 1, establish a housing credit program to incentivize officers to live in certain low-income census tracts within the city, and we will encourage officers to volunteer 2 paid hours every 2-week pay period during their regular work shift at an organization in the community that they serve. Next, as I've said before, we often ask our police officers to not only keep the peace, but to deal with challenges that society has failed to address, from mental health to homelessness to substance abuse and everything in between. That's not fair to our officers, and it's not the right way to address these challenges. That's why we will create a program to include social workers at LMPD so they can provide support and assistance on certain police runs where their presence could be helpful. Metro Council has already initiated funds in this activity. And finally, we must have transparency and accountability for the work that our officers do. Good officers appreciate sunlight on their work, and we will take several steps to shine that light, including the following. We will now require a commanding officer to review and approve all search warrants, affidavits in support of search warrants, and risk matrices before an officer seeks judicial approval for the warrant. We're creating a clear command structure when executing warrants at multiple locations. We're adding additional protocols for money seized as evidence, expanding the random drug testing of officers, and we will negotiate with the FOP in 2021 to expand on the records that can be maintained in an officer's personnel files. We have updated the process when a police officer is being investigated by our professional standards unit and leaves LMPD before the completion of that investigation. Going forward, the Chief's closing letter will state his or her findings based on the evidence that exists in the file at the time of the officer's separation from LMPD, if sufficient evidence exists in the record to make such a determination, or will state that insufficient evidence exists to make a finding. If the nature of the complaint is significant enough to have reasonably resulted in the suspension of the officer, the investigation will continue gathering evidence to evaluate if additional officers were involved or other problems exist. And finally, in order to ensure monitoring of any officers who may need additional training or other support, we will implement an early warning system that tracks all use of force incidents, citizen complaints, investigations, and other key factors. As part of its ongoing top-to-bottom review of LMPD, Hillard Heinz will evaluate the early warning system and recommend any needed improvements. This system will also be monitored through the soon-to-be-formed Office of Inspector General. These are significant policy changes on top of many others that we've already made, including those that are part of Breonna's law, as well as changes to policies on use of force and if tear gas would ever need to be used. In addition to these policy changes, this settlement includes a payment to Breonna's estate of $12 million. I'm grateful for the hard work of my team and that of County Attorney Mike O'Connell and his team, and the cooperation and thoughtfulness with which the Taylor family and her attorneys work with us to get to this point. We're now going to hear from Lanita Baker, an attorney for Breonna's estate. Ms. Baker.